What up, Fit Fam? Coach Ryan from Team Flex. I want to dive in today to talk more about bodybuilder diets, kind of the evolution, and some things that I think are really wrong with a lot of stuff that you competitors out here may be doing with your diet. That's kind of holding you back from getting the best result on stage, holding you back from building as much muscle, burning as much fat, and also your most optimal health and wellness, longevity in life. Because, you know, trophies and stages and everything is all great, but there's going to be a time that you want to be just living your life beyond that, right? And most of you are not going to be competing in your 80s, your 90s, but you might still want to be around in those days. So let's talk about the exact things that I think are wrong with today's bodybuilding diet. So if you've studied bodybuilding as long as me, which I've done it extensively, like I've looked at some of the first quote unquote bodybuilders of our time, which is over hundreds of years ago at this point, right? Like the 1800s, we could go back and talk about some bodybuilders that, you know, weren't necessarily bodybuilders at the time, but they were. And I've studied all the way through history, even down to the Olympics and the Greeks and the Romans. And as far as you can find anybody trying to build muscle, burn fat, get an ideal physique and a look, I've studied it, okay, and I continue to study it and read it and learn it. And there was always very common themes for a long time until you get about to, you know, the 90s, if you will. The 90s seemed to be the time that bodybuilding diets really drastically shifted, and then we just stayed there. And there's really been no good reason, but we're still here doing that today, except now I would say bodybuilding diet's probably the worst they've ever been for a lot of reasons. So let me get down to the nitty gritty of what I'm talking about, because so far I'm just rambling, but we'll get there. Just hang out with me, I promise, all right? So the bodybuilding diet, of late before, for example, Arnold era, which is slightly before the 90s, 70s, 80s, Arnold era bodybuilders, golden era bodybuilders, if you will, silver era before them in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. They were very focused on whole foods all the time, okay? It was very much a focus on that. Like there's clips of even Arnold, which Arnold was pretty late stage for this era, saying that, I would never eat bread because bread was poison, literally, like, which is an extreme point of view. But my point is they were very focused on whole foods, meaning foods that came from nature in the way that they were intended, meaning, meats that were just the way it was. You got a piece of meat, you ate it. You didn't have to alter it. It wasn't made in a lab, wasn't made to be better for you, wasn't made out of plant proteins, blah, blah, blah. It was just a piece of meat, right? And the same thing with foods from fruits, vegetables, unaltered things. Apple comes off a tree, you eat it, right? A carrot grows in the ground, you eat it. You're not altering it, you're not creating it, you're not doing all this stuff. And those largely were the focuses and staples of all bodybuilding diets back then. They were very focused on animal proteins, getting good quality fats, getting high proteins, maybe on the lower carb side, because, a lot of carbs in nature. Most of the things we eat that contain a lot of carbs are made by man. Let's just put it that way. Bread, tons of carbs, okay? Tortillas, tons of carbs. Chips, tons of carbs. Most of the things that people, cake, ice cream, all the stuff that you could go down the rabbit hole with, they're created by mankind in one way or another by being a processed food or an ultra processed food. And a lot of people have been asking me questions about this because, obviously there's a lot of changes going on potentially to the foods structure and the way that Americans specifically are going to be dealing with, the food choices they have, the additives that are allowed, all this stuff, right? And that directly all does affect it. But realistically, too, we need to look at the fact that for a long period of time, some of the most successful bodybuilders in the world and just athletes in general that honestly were achieving feats that today you wouldn't really even be able to match in most ways, were following very high fat, high protein, lower carb type diets that were focused on whole foods. Okay. And that's not to say there weren't hard carb bodybuilders back in the day and high carb, this and that. There definitely was. But they were still focused on whole foods, right? Like some of the silver era kind of diet routines, if you will, followed mainly like a protein and a fruit and a protein and some other kind of, vegetable and a protein and a fruit again, these types of things where they're talking about minimally processed, unaltered, natural, whole type foods, eating a food the way that it came, so that's realistically the entire goal and the entire thing of bodybuilding is to eat the most optimal. And that's where, again, I think we've lost it since the 90s and into the 2000s and where we are today, 2025, which is, in bodybuilding, it's a blink of an eye, but realistically, that's a long time to me and you. If we look at that, though, there was a time in the 90s where diets started to shift a lot. They started to really shift towards high carb, low fat, and that became the thing that everybody was doing. Very high protein, very high carb, very low fat, okay? And since then, that was really the time that everybody started adopting the, oatmeal and egg white diet and the chicken breast and broccoli or brown rice diet. And that's all you eat. And you eat it 6 times a day. Maybe you throw some tilapia and asparagus in there, and that's what you eat, right? And that became what competitors started doing. And that became what coaches started to just kind of regurgitate, right? Because coaches out there get that diet from another coach or get it from somebody else or whoever knows how they got it. And they just start giving it to everybody. And I mean, that today is still a big problem where a lot of competitors are eating this type of food that is virtually nutrient void. Okay. And what I mean by this is, compared to what you will gain from other sources of foods, you're eating very minimal nutrients compared. Eating egg whites, for example, compared to a whole egg, it's a night and day difference in what you're going to be able to eat and what that's going to do for your body. I promise you. It's like crazy the difference that you can get in the effect of just eating the egg yolk, eating an egg, actually how an egg comes, versus trying to modify it and alter it yourself, which is really what you do, by the way, right? Like, we're talking about all sorts of things happen in the food industry where they genetically alter foods, where they change this, they move that, they add this ingredient, take that. But you're also doing that yourself in a lot of ways. If you take a whole egg, you crack the shell and you throw away the yolk, you're altering a food the way that it came and making it some other type of a food to avoid whatever things you think you're supposed to. But the point is, all of the nutrients, most of the nutrients in an egg are in that yolk, okay? And you want to be eating that because that's going to fuel your progress, fuel your results, fuel your muscle building, your fat loss, your result on stage, and guess what? Also your longevity and your health overall, right? We have learned a lot over time in diet. Granted, bodybuilding industry hasn't seemed to caught up, but you can pay attention to almost any other industry in fitness and nutrition, and there's been a lot of change in perspectives there. Bodybuilding has not yet really had this awakening, and hopefully I'm part of doing that because that's really why I'm trying to get this content out there and talk a lot more about this because this is important for everybody to know. But you need to be eating more nutrient dense foods, and you need to be considering foods that are coming the way that, nature intended for you. As silly as it sounds, everybody is eating all this crazy altered, ultra processed foods. And, you might say, well, ultra processed foods are not for me. That's what, obese people eat or things like this, where they're going to Walmart and they're grabbing whatever things in boxes. Bodybuilders be doing this too. I'm going to be honest with you. Bodybuilders are doing this. You go to the supplement store and you get your special protein chips and you get, your protein bar or your protein shake or your protein macaroni, protein cheese puffs, all these foods that are just altered. They're made by some supplement industry that wants to sell them to you, and they're not, again, going to fit the bill of being a natural food that's coming to you, a whole food, the way it was meant for your body to. And it's different when you eat this type of stuff as a competitor. I'll tell you what, when you go eat a whole egg yolk versus a white or something like this, right? You would think that makes absolutely no difference, but it makes a substantial difference, right? The people that are already eating relatively good compared to what could be the worst, they respond far better to eating even 1% better, right? You might not see that with somebody who's obese or somebody that has a lot of progress that they need to make. They need to lose 100, 200 pounds, something like this for their health and their wellness. Well, if they start eating whole eggs today, it doesn't really do all that much. It will eventually, but it may not do anything instantly. For competitors, I'll tell you what, when you're already dialed in, you already have a good amount of muscle mass, you're already at a relatively good level of condition, and you start eating a little bit different, you notice changes like within 24 hours. A lot of times, right? So, this is one of those things where you can maximize your potential on stage. You can maximize your ability to get results. You can maximize everything. And then also know that you're taking the best care of your health, your wellness, your longevity as a person, right? And you might say, okay, well, you talked about eggs. I get that. You're hammering that. You've said it a lot on this channel. What else is there, right? Well, the next biggest meal bodybuilders eat, chicken breast and brown rice, chicken breast, broccoli. The problem with this is, again, and not to be crazy, you guys, but if you take a chicken and you just eat one part of it, you again have altered that food, right? A chicken as a whole would be a food to eat. The whole bird, the whole animal, the way it is, the thighs, the wings, the drumsticks, the breast, all of it would be a chicken. That would be a whole chicken. Now, if you go hack away every other piece and say, no, I only eat the breast, I only eat chicken breast because it's lean, that's what I think I'm supposed to eat, that's what I'm going to eat, so my coach said to eat, okay, well, you're eating one part now of a chicken repeatedly. And again, if you start to think about it a little bit differently, like we are a human organism, yes, but we are also just a living organism like anything else. You wouldn't find bears or lions or, any other animal you could think of, birds, things like this, eating exactly one part of anything that it would eat. It doesn't even make sense, right? It really doesn't ultimately make sense. I mean, if you gave a dog the ability to eat a whole chicken or just a chicken breast, it's going to eat the whole dang chicken. And that's how nature works, because that makes sense. If it's a food that's optimal for you to eat, you're going to eat it all, right? So again, hacking away part of that becomes part of a problem, because now you are limiting yourself to certain nutrients, certain fats that you're going to get or not, certain, minerals that you may get or not, certain things that are only going to be contained in the breast versus what would be contained in the rest of the bird, so on and so forth, right? So again, extreme examples, but these do make a big difference, right? And when I'm building plans for clients, I'm working on their macros, or I'm building them a meal plan because that's what they requested, right? I'm working on making sure that they're having a balanced profile of proteins, carbs, fats, whatever they need based on whatever their goals are, wherever they want to fit. And also, like, especially on a meal plan, I'm never giving somebody this bland, repeatable, just blah, blah, blah. I won't even do it. People sometimes even ask me for that. They're like, I want the most simple plan. And I'll still make it more complicated than they want, because realistically, there's so many variables to think of when you want to get the most optimal nutrient profile for your goals as a competitor, but also for your goals as a human being to live your best, most optimal life, right? So again, the chicken breast thing, if you're hacking away the rest of the bird and calling it bad because it's got more fat or it's got this or that, I promise you, you're missing out on things that you could benefit from immensely in many ways as a competitor, as a bodybuilder, and as a person in life who wants to live healthier. Okay, so that's another big example. And then, why is it always brown rice? Why is it always white rice? Why is it just rice that becomes a carb source? Granted, rice I like a little bit better than breads, things like that, because again, it's not as modified, if you will, not as processed, if you will. But again, why does it have to be that? It doesn't always have to be that. It's crazy to hear, bodybuilders kind of demonize fruits and get, oh, fruit's bad, it's got sugar, this and that. I mean, fruits, a lot of people are eating fruits and they're totally healthy, feeling great, doing, great things for themselves. And competitors, huge advantage to you if you start eating fruits, right? A lot of competitors, by the way, and you watching probably, if you watch this far, thanks for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. And I hope you're getting the ideas and the topics. But a lot of competitors always talk about feeling just miserable, right? Like they feel terrible. They feel like they're sick all the time. They feel like they're run down, total fatigue, prep feels, as you will. You hear about it all the time, right? Just not looking good, not feeling good. Bags under the eyes, start to look white in the face, start to just look depleted as humans. And I'll tell you what, a lot of it is because of the diet and the things that they omit from it, and the fact they're eating these nutrient void foods when you could eat something like fruit over rice. Rice does not ultimately have really much going for it aside from carbs. Fruits contain, the same carbs that you would want if you want carbs in your diet. And then they also contain a bunch of minerals and other things and vitamins that you can benefit from. So again, every time you eat, what the question should be, you should be eating for nutrient density, right? If you're going to make a food choice, look for nutrient density. Don't look for macros in the sense of carbs and proteins and fats. And that's fine if you really want to do that. You don't want to, attain a high level of health, wellness, or longevity, or even physique on stage. If you're fine with being, hey, I would rather have the protein Cheetos, and okay, great, it's going to fit my macros. All right, whatever, do it then. That's fine. But also understand that every single thing you eat is going to have a cause and effect reaction. It's either going to be a cause to bring you closer to your goals, to bring you closer to your overall best health and wellness, bring you closer to the longevity that pretty much everybody wants to have, or it's not. Right. And that's realistically how it goes. And everybody's free to make their own choices. But I think you should know those things if you are going to make those choices, right? You want to know if there's stuff that's out there that's better for you nutrient wise. Wouldn't you want to know that so that you can benefit from that? Right. And I'll tell you what, when I'm doing plans again for my clients, Make sure this is involved, whether it's macros or meal plans, whatever it is. Hey, we have a focus on whole foods. I want you to focus on that. I want you to eat, steak. I want you to eat red meat. I want you to avoid, have chicken breast if you want, but don't have it every freaking day, 6 times a day. Have egg whites a couple meals. I don't care, but also have the whole eggs every now and then. Do this and that. If you love oatmeal, have some oatmeal, great, but let's focus on getting some other carb sources in there too that may contain more vitamins and minerals. And then, you start to build a diet that is not only the best for your goals as a competitor, but it's also good for you living the most optimal life, longevity, everything else, your health, your wellness, and you feel freaking phenomenal. That's the biggest thing. You feel absolutely incredible when you start focusing on real nutrition, real nutrients, nutrient density, versus just throwing it out the window and saying it's all about macros, it's all about this and that. I don't care. I'm not too worried about it, right? And I'm no advocate for having such a strict, rigid diet. You can't ever have fun. You can't go eat a piece of pizza or a whole pizza if you want, every now and then, or whatever it is. I don't have all of it, but also make sure that you understand, right? There is a cause and effect relationship with the things you eat. It's either going to propel you and bring you forward, bring you to better, closer goals, bring you to better longevity, health, everything else, or it's not. And, a balanced approach, a sustainable approach where, okay, maybe you do hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying overhaul your diet. I'm not saying take it all away. I'm not saying stop egg whites today, stop this and that. I'm saying bring some more food into the party and see how you start feeling. When you start eating whole eggs versus egg whites, when you start eating, different parts of a chicken, maybe one day is the breast, maybe next day you have thighs, maybe next day you have drums, whatever. You start to do this, you start to notice exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe swap some of that chicken for some red meat, some ground beef, some fatty ground beef, or some steaks, things like that you can bring in that are going to be different. You start to feel immensely different as a competitor. Your muscle gains get better. Your intensity in the gym gets better. Your fat loss gets better. Your overall function as a human gets better. You have more energy in your day. You wake up feeling ready for the day. You got juice to get things done. And that goes from prep, kills the prep, makes it great, makes it awesome. That prep's over. You totally destroyed that thing in a good way, meaning like you killed it, you crushed it. And then that also bleeds over in every other area of your life where now you're feeling better, you're functioning better, you're doing more, you're better at work, you're better at your career, you're better in your life because of the things you eat. And so I think, bodybuilding has lost sight of this where it becomes just about, macros and this and that and just do that and this. No, not anymore. We need to focus on nutrient density. We need to focus on making most optimal nutrient choices. We need to focus on those things in every which way. I think that that's really key. I'm going to make more videos on this topic. I want to know what your questions are though. Like what else do you want to learn? Do you want food specifics? Do you want exact, like these are good foods to consider. These ones are less optimal. What do you want out of me? And I will get it done for you. I appreciate you watching, especially if you made it this far. Thank you for watching. Coach Ryan is out.